Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another summer of Dine and Learn. Anyone know which year this is of the Dine and Learn program in general?
According to the announcement that was made, I think this last Shabbat morning is the 12th year.
12th cycle of Dine and Learn. Shkar to Moish once again for doing a phenomenal job in arranging this. I encourage everyone to go to Moish to volunteer to sponsor so he doesn't have to come to us. And I'd like to thank tonight the Katz family, Mr. and Mrs. Mayor Katz, who could not be here, but they sponsored the dinner tonight. L'zecher Nishmas, Mr. Katz's father, Yaakov Bereb Tzvi Zev, and his grandfather, Tzvi Zev Bereb Yaakov, the Neshama should have an aliyah. Thank you very much. I did not expect a crowd as big as this, and so I apologize. I don't have enough handouts, but you could share. So I'm going to give a brief introduction. The topic for the summer is Sephardic Halacha after the Spanish exile, and I'll tell you why I was thinking about this, and it's not a particularly great story, but I'll tell you the story. Anyway, down the street we have Mizrahi used books, so I was there, and he's always trying to sell me things, of course, that's his job, and he had gotten a shipment from some Hasidic fellow with a lot of relatively recently published tshuva farm from random times in history. And he showed it to me, and I saw this tshuva sefer of Mahari Beirav. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. And I'd never seen it before. So I got it from him, and I started learning it. I was fascinated. I was extremely interested. And then I went to see what else he had. And then he had a tshuva, a set of the tshuvas of Maharam al-Ashkar, who lived at the same time. And that's fascinating. Then I realized I have the tshuvas of the Radbaz in my basement. And then as I'm starting to gather all these forum, I realized I have quite a few articles I could write about just what I'm seeing in these tshuvas and shiurim, and it's fascinating. One thing that struck me, though, is there was incredible genius at that time in period, at that time in history. And it made me wonder, so what causes this genius to happen? It was after the expulsion. Many of these people were expelled from Spain, and if not, they're living at that time where there's tumult going on. Is it the times that create the genius? Or is it that the times just let us recognize that genius? I don't know the answer. But as we'll see, there are real personalities who actually get to know some of these great gedolim of the time. And as we discuss it, I'm not going to introduce everybody at one time because that gets boring. We'll talk about two specific personalities tonight, and over the summer we'll get introduced to a few others. So when we think of Jews in Spain, we think of acculturated Jews, right? They were part of the culture. They were wealthy. They were well-to-do. They were philosophically very well known. They knew the philosophy very well, and that's all true. But there was also in that very society a very fertile Torah culture as well, and we know that because some of the people who were expelled and left Spain. So the Mahari Beirav, we're going to talk about in a minute. I just mentioned before, he was 17. At the time of the expulsion from Spain, 1492, the time of the expulsion from Spain, he arrived in Morocco, and at the age of 18, they appointed him as a Rav of a community of 5,000 people. He was a genius. He was an Eloi. He was incredible. And he learned in Spain. He learned in Toledo, in the yeshiva there. There was great Talmud Torah, even in this community, that was incredibly assimilated. And as we look around today, we can see a lot of assimilation, but also a lot of incredible Torah as well. Just an interesting combination. So a little brief historical background. So there was no Spain at that time. There were different kingdoms. So what happened in the 1460s is the heir to the throne of Aragon, Ferdinand, was married off to the heir of the throne of Castile, Isabella. Ferdinand and Isabella, they got married. They united the kingdom, and so around the year 700, the Muslims from North Africa, they conquered Spain. And then for the next 700 years or so, the Christians are trying to kick them out. Ferdinand and Isabella kicked the Muslims out. Now, thinking about it today, I don't want to get political, but we kind of think, the Christians kicked out the Muslims, that's a good thing. But different Christians, different Muslims. In those days, the people who were beheading Jews, Khalila, were the Christians, not the Muslims. And the people under where the Jews could live in relative peace and quiet were the Muslims, not the Christians. But whatever it is, so Ferdinand and Isabella, they united the kingdom, kicked out the Muslims. They started the exploration of the New World, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. and they expelled the Jews. They were not the first. They were. I don't know if they were the first, but they were one of many other countries that also expelled Jews. Jews were expelled from many Christian countries, and they had to wander around. So the Mahari Beirav, he was 17. He went to Portugal. Wasn't a very good life in Portugal. They were kicked out a few years later. So from there, he made his way to Fez, Morocco. So Spain, if you look at a map, so Spain is the Iberian Peninsula, and you have the Rock of Gibraltar, the Straits of Gibraltar, and right below that is North Africa. So Jews, there were already Jewish communities there, so a lot of Jews went to North Africa. So he went to Fez, Morocco. He was a Rav there. Then the problem with being so close to Spain, the good thing with being close to Spain is it's easy to get there. The problem is the Christians were attacking, so they had to get out of there. So he went to Algeria. In Algeria, he learned the Torah of the Rashbats, which we'll see in the future weeks is very important. Rashbats, 100 years ago, previous, 1391, was a big pogrom and many Jews left Spain. Rashbats was among them. He went to Algiers and he became immediately a Spanish rabbi, gets to North Africa, and they immediately put him on the top Bezdin. This is going to answer a question that we have in later tonight. So the Ma'ari Beirav, he's 17, 18, he's getting a little older. He moves to Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, in those days, so it's a holy city, everybody wanted to live there, but the community was very small. Why was the community in Yerushalayim so small? So I'll tell you a story. When I was in Israel a few years ago, my daughter was in seminary. So I was staying near the old city, and my personal clock was all whacked out. So I was awake, 23 hours a day. So on Shabbos, I decided to daven at one of the earliest minyans at the Kotel. And on my way back, there's this old lady with the back hunched over, walking, leaning on this little Yemenite kid who clearly wants to go play. It's maybe 7:30 in the morning, very early. So she sees me, he calls me over in Hebrew, and then I say something in English, and she says, "Oh, you speak English." The kid runs, and she leans on me, and I help her walk to her friend's house where she's going to have Kiddush. So this lady, as we're walking to her friend's house, she entertains me with her conversation. So she lives in the old city, but she grew up in New York. She went to Columbia University. And in 1967, after Israel reconquered the old city, so she and her husband decided to make Aliyah. And they bought an apartment in the old city. I guess at that time it was not as crazy as it is. The real estate, it was not as crazy as it is today. They had no idea what they're going into. That's what she told me. There was no food. There was no water. They were starving. They were thirsty. We go to Yerushalayim today and we say everybody's got a water bottle, right? Everywhere you go, you could buy another water bottle for $20 for a water bottle, whatever, how much it costs. But in those days, there were no deliveries. It was very, very hard. It was very difficult life. In the 1500s, in Yerushalayim, it was extremely difficult. The Muslims ruled. So until 1517, the Mamluk dynasty ruled, and then the Ottomans in 1517 conquered. And one Muslim ruler over another. The life was not good there. It was very difficult. We have letters from people who learned in yeshiva there. They say the learning that we do in a month is like the learning we could do in Chutz La'aretz in a day, because the famine and the hunger is so great we can't even pay attention. So everybody tried to settle in Yerushalayim. Almost nobody did. So the Ma'ari Beirav goes to Yerushalayim, doesn't work out. He goes to Egypt. Egypt, he's almost immediately put on the Bezdin of the Nagid. The Nagid is a political leader in Egypt. And he has a Bezdin. He's a Talmud Chacham, but he's not the Gadol Hador. So he has a Bezdin of the Gedolei Hador. So this young kid, the Mahari Beirav, is automatically put on the Bezdin. He has his personality where he's bold, brilliant. His whole life, people have been telling him is brilliant. He sees a machlokas, he runs straight into it. Every controversial topic we'll talk over the next few weeks, he was arguing with everybody else. His tshuvas are beautiful, brilliant. They had a pen of gold. I mean, it was incredible. But he found his way of not making friends so easily. It's the curse of the genius, that you don't always realize that other people can have other opinions. So we'll see in a few weeks how he really, really gets into it. It's actually quite geschmack. But okay, so he's in Egypt. Then he goes to Tzfas. Tzfas is, because Yerushalayim is so hard to live in those days, Tzfas was really the Ir HaKodesh. That's where all the Talmidei Chachamim settled Sfas, the holy people. If you think about what happened in Sfas in the 1500s with the Arizal and all the Kabbalah and Kabbalah, everything was going on in Sfas. It's a little later. Mahari Berav was a few decades earlier, but still. So he goes to Sfas. He's immediately made the chief, not officially chief rabbi, but he is the leading rabbi in Sfas. Among his students there are the Mabit, who is a very important posek, and Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. He refers to my Rebbe, Mahari Berav. We'll see that in a few minutes. That's who the Mahari Berav. That's how big he was. That's why when I saw the tshuvas of the Mahari Berav, I said, wow. So now I own a copy. If you go to Mizrachi, maybe he has another copy. I don't know. So that's one. So I only want to introduce you to two personalities tonight. We'll have more time over the summer to meet others. The Radbaz. Radbaz is probably the most famous name that you'll hear this summer. He's very important in Halacha. He also, so nobody quite knows when he was born. I think it was around 1463. 1463, which means he was about 29 at the time of the expulsion from Spain. So he grew up in Spain. He learned in Spain. After the expulsion, he went to Sfas. He learned there. Then he went to Egypt. He was a very solid Talmid Chacham, a genius, a gadol. He was also on the Beis Din of the Nagid. You can see from his writings that he really wanted to like the Mahari Berav as a person, but sometimes it was difficult. You'll see. So I'm telling you this because it's very important. There's a Talmid Chacham, a big Talmid Chacham in Yerushalayim, Rav Yisrael Ariel. He's the head of the Temple Mount Institute, or the Temple Institute, the Machon HaMikdash. Does a lot of interesting things. So I visited there earlier this year, and I bought a few svarim from the bookstore, as many as my wife would let, not too many. He has this 1,100-page sefer on whether and how we can reinstitute the Sanhedrin. What does it require? So the Mahari Berav, his most famous machlokus, was that he tried to reinstitute the original smicha based on language of the Rambam, which Mr. Shem will talk at the end of the summer. And he gave smicha to a few people, including the Rav Yosef Karo. He gave smicha saying, this is the smicha of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, not everybody was so happy with that. That's the machlokas. So this 1,100-page book, so he has a nice long chapter, actually 3 chapters, on this machlokas of the Mahari Berav. And I think he completely gets it all wrong. I mean, his analysis of the texts are very good. You can disagree on certain things, but the background is key. You have to understand the people who are in the machlokas and the background, which is why we'll only get to it at the end of the summer, because we got to go through the summer first and get to know the Mahari Berav before we can fully understand the machlokas. So the Radbaz, at 1517, I said the Ottomans, they conquered Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, Libya. I mean, it was 1516, 1517. The Ottoman Empire, and that was in 1517. And when were they conquered? When did they lose that territory? In 1917, 1918, at the end of World War I. Yeah. 401 years, they ruled Eretz Yisrael and Egypt. So they said, so the Nagid, who had been the political leader of the Jewish community under the Mamluk Empire dynasty, so the Ottomans obviously said, you're no longer in charge, we're in charge. And they appointed the Radbaz, the Chacham Bashi, the chief rabbi of Egypt, which he was for approximately 40 years. So think about it for a minute. So in Spain, the Christians, Ferdinand and Isabella, whatever, they wanted to force the Jews either to convert to Christianity or die. The Radbaz left, became the chief rabbi of Egypt. At the age of 90, he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, went to Yerushalayim first, and then to Tzfas, and lived to be 110 years old. He outlived Ferdinand and Isabella by a long time. And so he was in Egypt and in Tzfas when all the excitement was happening. Among his Talmidim, the Shita Mekubetzes, or B'Tzalel Ashkenazi, wait, don't say wow yet, and Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal. So the Radbaz was Makubal. You don't see it in his halacha, but you do see it he wrote some Svarim al Pi Kabbalah. Over 3,000 shuvas we have from him. That's what we have. Very, very important in halacha. Lived to 110. Wow. After going through all that, exile from Spain. So I have a question for you. Why are Middle Eastern Jews called Sephardim? Sephard means Spain. So there are thousands of exiles leaving Spain. where do they go? They settle around the Mediterranean. That's the easiest place to go. So that's North Africa, Egypt, Israel, Turkey, Greece. And they're all called Sephardim. So shouldn't these exiles blend into the community where they arrive? But what we see is the exact opposite. They basically take over these communities. It takes some time. Not everybody's happy with it. That's pretty much what we'll be discussing for the rest of the summer. But we said the Radbaz became the chief rabbi in Egypt. What happened to other rabbis in Egypt? How do you think they felt? The Mahari Rav, this young guy, comes in and starts making machlokas. That's how great the Talmud Torah was in Spain, even until the end. That's how great it was. So the Shem HaGedol in the Chidah says that when the Radbaz got to Egypt, the Radbaz, it's not Mahri Rav who liked to get into things, it was Radbaz. He changed how they did shtaros, a shtar, right, a contract, a ksuba, a get. So in the times of the Gemara, or even before then, they dated the shtaros on what they call minyan shtaros, which means from when the Greeks conquered the Persians, that's year 1 or year 0, however it was. And they counted from there. It's a little arbitrary. It sounds a little weird. Fine, in those days, that was a big deal. But, you're living in the 1400s, or even in the year 800s. It's ancient history. So most communities got rid of that, and we dated to, as you hear when they read Ksuba, the Briyas Olam, to creation. We did 57, 78. But we say, here's something interesting, the Rivash says. Why do we say? We say, Laminyan sha'anu monin kan. Because we don't actually know exactly, precisely, what year it is from Briyas Olam. It's a machlokas. There are many different opinions. So because of that, the Rivash says, just say, Laminyan sha'anu monin kan. It's more or less 57, 78, give or take. So the Radbaz gets to Egypt, and they're still doing minyan shtaros. In Egypt, in Israel, in Lebanon. So the Radbaz goes in and he says, stop, no more. You're doing it like everybody else. And he changes it. And he's basically telling every married couple, your ksuba? We're not doing that anymore. That takes big shoulders.
He's not invalidating it.
He's not invalidating it, but he's saying, that's old-fashioned. That's not how we do it anymore. We're in the whatever. We're in the 5,000th, the 5th millennium or the 6th millennium. We're doing it the new way now. It's a big deal. That's just the beginning. So if you look on your sheets, source 1, the Beis Yosef, right, the Talmud of the Mahari Rav, he says, "V'nimsa kasav b'sefer hapliya," and this whatever sefer it was, "Sheshat chozer ani Hashem Elokeichem." So when we say Kriya Shema, when we say the Shema, we say Shema, we say Baruch Shem Kavod, then we say 3 paragraphs, and then we wait for the Chazan, and then he says Hashem Elokeichem Emes. So this sefer says no, the Chazan should say Ani Hashem Elokeichem. V'haya b'Mitzrayim misha haya noheg dvarav, and there's some people in Egypt who follow that. So v'yigaru bo hanagid hagadol kvod moreno harav Yitzchak HaKohen. So the nagid, the political leader, forced them to stop. And who also got involved? Umari harav hagadol moreno harav Yaakov Beirav. The Mari Beirav, he got involved, and he's going around Egypt telling people that's not how you say Kriya Shema. In shoals, he's telling shoals, change your custom. This is how it must be. So let's talk a little background on this. So the Gemara in Brachos, that's source 2, says that you cannot pause between Elokeichem and Emes, right? We say Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes. You're not allowed to pause in between that. Even though Emes is the beginning of the blessing, the bracha, and Elokeichem is the end of Shema, we cannot pause, we have to say. So even in our quiet Shema, we end with Emes because we're not allowed to pause in between. So the Midrash, Tanchuma, on source 3, Amar Rebbe Mani, Lo te Kriya Shema kala beinecha. Kriya Shema should not be light, should not be unimportant to you. Well, who would think Kriya Shema is unimportant? Mitzvah deraisa? So yeah, okay, the first pasuk is a mitzvah deraisa. Maybe the first paragraph is a deraisa. He's talking all 3 paragraphs should not be light in your eyes. Why do we say the last paragraph? Because it has Sisis and it has Yitzias Mitzrayim. So at night we say because of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Right? From the Haggadah, it's a Mishnah. Okay. But that could be kalba in your eyes. So he says, don't let it be light. Don't let it be meaningless. Mipnei sheyesh ba ramach tevos. It has 248 words. Keminyan evarim sheba adam. There are 248 limbs in a human body, right? So what's a limb? Well, I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll work backwards and go from 248. We'll figure out whatever the 248 are. So that's in the male body. There are 248 limbs, and that corresponds to the 248 words. The Kriya Shema, right? Umehen Baruch Shem. We include Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'Olam Va'ed. Those extra 6 words. So we have 248. So Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Im Shamarta Es Shali. If you keep what is mine, meaning if you say Kriya Shema, the full 3 paragraphs with all 248 words. Ketikuna, exactly, the right way to do it, as established. Ani yeshmor shalcha. I will guard, I will keep you healthy. All 248 of your limbs, if you say Kriya Shema properly, all your body will remain healthy. 248 words. So there's a problem here. The problem only comes up in the Zohar, source 4. So Avama Rabbi Narai, so Kriya Shema yesh ramach tevos, right? Kriya Shema has 248 words. Kemini ramach evarib shel adam. Like your limbs, v'akari Kriya Shema ketikuna. If you read Kriya Shema, like it's established, kol aver ve'aver notel teva achas. Every limb takes 1 word, la'atzmo for itself, u'misrapebo, and is healed from it. V'da'ihu, and this is what the pasuk says, rifos tihi l'sharecha v'shiku ilatzmosecha. It's a pasuk in Mishlei that the words of Torah should be healing for your body. So hachi. So at that point in time, as he's speaking. So mata hahu yanuka. So a little kid comes into the Beis Medrash, just sits down, and he listens. Mata hahu yanuka la'im orcha. So he comes in from the street. V'yosif kamayu. Sits in front of him. Shama ilain milin. He hears these words. Kam al ragloi. He jumps up onto his legs. V'omar. And he says, V'halo b'kriya shema ein sham ela ramah tevos. It only has 248 words. Right, so 245 words. It should be 200. Missing 3. Amar le Rebbe Chia Tivni. So he said, okay, good, sit down, relax, calm down. And then he said, Amar B'ni, so my son, Shemata behind midi. So obviously you didn't just count them, so you must have heard it from somewhere. So where do you hear it from and tell me the answer? Right? If someone asks you a leading question and you don't want to start guessing, you know he has an answer just and he's just waiting for you, he's smiling. So you just say, okay, no, tell me the answer. So Amar le, this is what the kid said, the young child said. Kach shemati me'abba. This is what I heard from my father. The B'kriya Shema yesh ramach tevos. There are 248 words. Chaser tlas. Missing 3. Laminin evarim shel adam. So my takante. How do you fix it? That there should be 248. Takinu the shliach tzibur chaser shalosh tevos elu. So they established. That's why the shliach tzibur. He repeats the 3 words. But my ninhu Hashem Elokechem emes. So the Zohar says, what are the 3 we repeat? Hashem Elokechem emes. That should settle the matter, right? So no, so there are different versions actually. So Menachem Rekanti, so one of the Mekubalim, so he has in his sefer that he repeats Ani Hashem Elokechem, and then once someone saw that, he came up with a whole svara that Ani is a different midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I can't even start to explain it because I don't understand it. But he tried to come up with a Kabbalistic explanation of why you have to say Ani. The Shatz has to say Ani when he repeats it. So there are 3 tshuvas on the subject, in addition to what we saw from the Beis Yosef. There's a tshuva of the Maharam al-Ashkar Siman Samech Vav. There's a tshuva of Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi. So Maharam al-Ashkar was in Egypt. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, he was the Rav of Constantinople. And the Mahar al-Bach was in Yerushalayim. So there are 2 questions. Number 1 is, so how many words? So we established, how many words are there in Kriya Shema? 245, right? 239 plus 6 of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'Olam Va'ed, 245. And then what is the, so we read until Emes, and then the Chazan says Hashem Elokechem Emes. So does Emes count or not? If Emes counts, there's really 246. Plus 3 is 249. If it doesn't count, so then it's 245 plus 2, 247. So how do you get to 248? That's one question. Now the question is that the Mishnah, it's actually twice in the Mishnah, once in Brachos and once in Megillah, says if you say Shema, if you say Shema twice, so we silence you because it sounds like you're praying to 2 gods. So here we're saying Emes. So should we also, is it allowed to say Emes twice here? So the Maram al-Ashkar says there are 3 types of minhagim. There's a good, proper minhag. There's an acceptable, okay, we'll let you get away with it minhag. And then there's a wrong minhag. So he says, to say, repeat, Hashem Elokeichem emes, that's the proper minhag. That's what we're supposed to do. So one emes is there to count for the 248. We have that in mind. And the other emes is just because we can't stop. We have to go straight into the bracha. So one emes counts for 248, the other doesn't. And he says, if you say Shema Shema for a mitzvah, so nobody's going to think you're doing an avera when you're trying to do a mitzvah. So there's no mitzvah to say Shema twice. So then that's why it's usher to do it. But to say emes twice for the mitzvah of getting the 248 words, so that is a mitzvah, so then it's allowed. That's the Maharam al-Ashkar. So he accepts and upholds our minhag. And he says, if you want to hold this Kabbalistic minhag, so I'm not going to stop you, but I'm not going to encourage you either, this extra one of starting with ani. But if you say, some people were saying only ani, only Hashem Elokeichem, so he said, that's wrong. That's against the Gemara. You have to say emes as well. And so therefore he was against that minhag. Okay, so the Rabach gets even more geschmack, more interesting, fascinating actually, the Rabach. That's source number 5. So he starts off saying there's some Makobel in Constantinople who tried to get people to change how they did Kriya Shema. He was going to shuls, proselytizing for this minhag of saying Ani Hashem Elokeichem. He was telling the Shliach Tzibor, and they were professional chazanim even. He was telling the professional chazanim, your training was wrong. Trust me, I'm a Makobel. I know. So the Rabach says, we should not change the minhag of Hashem Elokeichem emes. So if you think about it, though, any of these are minhagim al pi Kabbalah. It's from the Zohar, right? So the Rabach is not against minhagim that al pi Kabbalah, but he says as follows. If you look at source 5, v'yadua shekol mi sheyeh mihador hazeh. Anyone in this generation, talking about the 1500s, so that's over 500 years ago. Sheyomer Ezer Davar Chadash, who's going to say, here's a new minhag, something new to do. Ve'iten tam ledvar mizeh hamin, and he gives his explanation based on Kabbalah. Ein lachosh lo klal, you should not pay any attention to him. Ulashanos minhag al piv, and you should not change any minhag based on what he says. Zulasi, except imia ish muchzak lanu bechachma hamiti sahi, unless we know for sure he's an expert in Kabbalah. Mashalon nimsa ba'avonos. But we don't have such people. Therefore, says the Ralbach, so Shabtai Tzvi would be even stronger, but he lived like 150 years before. He actually lived before the Arizal. So the Arizal came, and if not the Arizal, then some of his Talmidim did in fact change minhagim. But I guess you would say that the Arizal, if not him, then who is an expert in Kabbalah? But to see, the Rabach is not against minhagim al pi Kabbalah. He's against changing minhagim based on some guy coming and saying, look, I'm an expert and you're not. Because he said, look, let's face it, who is this guy? He's a third-rate scholar. We don't know who he is or what he's saying. Don't change anything. So Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi in Constantinople, source 6, goes even further. So, okay, so you don't have it here in the excerpt. It's actually long tshuva. So he says the number of words is important based on Kabbalah. Okay, but let's think about that Zohar that we read. So these rabbis did not know that you're supposed to repeat the last 3 words of Kriya Shema. They had never heard of such a thing. So until that kid got up in the Beis Medrash and said, my father told me to repeat 3 words of Kriya Shema at the end, what do? They just read Kriya Shema to the end, 245 words. So apparently his father must have been some big Makobel, big Talmud Chacham, and so that minhag spread. But you don't have to. You don't have to repeat the 3 parshas, three last words of Kriya Shema. Okay, that's the minhag. That did become established, and nobody's against that. But says the Mizrahi, he asks the question, Madua lo pirsimu harishonim. So these original people, this kid's father and all of his friends, the big Talmid Chachami, why didn't they publicize this minhag that you're supposed to repeat the last three words of Shema? Why didn't they tell everybody? And even so, who's this teaching in the Zohar? These are rabbis who knew Kabbalah, and they apparently they were not the first tier. Maybe they were second tier, or they just didn't learn this sugya of Kabbalah. They even Mekubalim didn't know you're supposed to repeat the last 3 words of Kriya Shema. V'gam l'kol Yisrael, and certainly to everybody else didn't know. Sheyu machzirim. Rather, what happened? Hayu yodim oso heim levadom la'asmam. They knew it themselves. V'lo hayu mefarsim oso, and they didn't publicize it. V'ayu toim bazeh. Afilu balei Kabbalah asmam, and even people who knew Kabbalah didn't know that you were supposed to repeat the last 3 words of Shema. V'kol sheken sharam, and certainly everybody else. So he needs those raya gedol. It says of Mizrahi, this is a big proof. She'ein zeh hadvarim sheroy lefarsem ulachriyach l'rabim. We shouldn't be publicizing this, and we shouldn't be telling people this is what you should do. Follow this. It was a private minhag of Mekubalim. So somehow it got spread. Okay, so whatever spread is spread. We follow what we follow. He's not against Kabbalah. He's not against minhagim based on Kabbalah. But we don't go around and start telling people to change what they do based on Kabbalah. And presumably, all Jews just read Shema to the end and didn't repeat the last 3 words. Because they didn't even count. They didn't count the words. See what he's saying. So these Mekubalim, clearly they counted the words. So I don't think we have it here. But the Mizrahi says, look, if only we would have kavanah for what the words mean, that would be great. But kavanah for the number of words, that's not something that normal people have nowadays. So it's not that important. So therefore, he says, al pi Kabbalah, we shouldn't be following these minhagim al pi Kabbalah. Not that he's against it, but we shouldn't be starting things that we don't understand and we can't follow. So so the Chasam Sofer in the Tshuva takes it a step farther, and I apologize because I know we're in a shul that's in Nosach Sfard. The Chasam Sofer was opposed to regular people davening Nosach Sfard. People disagreed, but the Chasam Sofer was opposed. He has 2 tshuvas on the subject. He says if you're a Makubal, good, daven al pi Kabbalah Nosach Sfard. But if you're not a Makubal, daven what your father davened. So nowadays, Nusach Sfard has spread, and nobody's changing their minhag to daven Nusach Sfard. So it's like this, repeating the last 3 words of Kriya Shema. If that's what you do, that's what you do. Nobody's against it. But look, let's face it, we don't have the right kavanos anyway. We don't know the Nusach Sfard from the Nusach Ashkenaz. We don't even know what we're saying. So we don't know the words. We don't know the number of words that we say. Some of the different nuschos have to do with the number of words in a special tefillah. Who knows how many words are in Baruch Shomar? No, me neither. I don't know. But that's the thing. It's the thing. It's you serious?
97.
It is a thing. Okay. See, we have our local makubal here.
Yeah.
So
There are 2 versions of Baruch Shomar.
yes,
There's also a long version.
and they specifically, so the Mekubalim specifically don't say the long one because they say it has to be a certain number of words. Rabbi Yaakov Emden talks about it in a siddur what he's opposed to because of the words, the number.
The Moroccan Mekbalim, they do say the long version on Shabbat.
On Shabbat.
On Shabbat.
Okay, and I'm sure there's a reason al pi Kabbalah that the Moroccans do that. Interesting. So where do we get tonight? We're a little over time, so I apologize. But what we saw was that these are mainly Spanish rabbis who came to the Middle East and start getting involved in what people minhagim they should follow and what they shouldn't follow. They're appointed chief rabbis. They're sending tshuvas all over the place. And what we see is that the reason they're called Sephardim is because Spain had a huge influence on the Middle East. And it's a mixture at this point. And there's a lot of Spain in Morocco. There's a lot of Spain in Egypt and in Israel. Because these rabbis came in and the communities came in and they were so learned and they were so confident that they came in and they to some degree, they took over. And for good or for bad, that's how history went. And now it's not an insult to call someone from the Middle East, to call him Sephardic, because even if he's not from Spain, some of his minhagim are.
87, not
87. Thank you.